Welcome to the very first Grafton Planning Board meeting of 2025, January 13th. Begin with a call the roll of the members, seeing as how we have one member participating remotely. Justin Wood.
Present.
Bob Hassinger.
I'm here.
Greg Dalamole.
Present.
Prabhu Venkatraman.
Present.
David Robbins is present. Associate member Ray Mead.
Here.
And staff planner Fiona Coughlin.
Present.
And assistant planner Natalia Allward.
Present.
All right, all present. Our first agenda item, as always, is public input. If there's anybody either in the room or on Zoom that wishes to speak to a matter that's not currently on the board's agenda, now would be the time to raise your hand. I see no attendees on Zoom, no raised hands on Zoom. I see no raised hands here in the room for public input, so we will move on. Been requested to take the accessory dwelling unit zoning bylaw changes out of order so that town council, who's here representing town council?
Ethan Dibley is here.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Ethan Dively of Harrington Heap.
Yeah, I still have to learn all the, it was, when we had just one person as town council, it was easy to know whether they were present or not. I have yet to learn all of the staff at town council, so maybe here. So, Fiona, do you want to begin this discussion?
Sure. So I'll be brief. So the board, we've been talking for a while now about how we're going to tackle the changes that are required by the Housing Bond Bill, namely sections 7 and 8. We prepared drafts that ranged from very basic edits to our bylaw to kind of more substantive changes that incorporate a lot more of the draft regulations, keyword being draft. The final set of regulations has not been issued yet. Ultimately, after the last meeting, it was the board discussed having basically the changes that comply with the law that allow, that involve minimal changes to our existing bylaw. So I drafted a document for review. It was uploaded to the meeting materials. We did receive a set of comments from Chair David Robbins. I also did upload just the language from the section 7 and 8 of the bill, as well as the draft regulations as a reminder. But long story short, as the board is strongly interested, and I agree that we should comply with the law without doing any significant overhaul of our zoning by any means. So I'll pull up the draft, and I'm happy to, I'm sorry, it's the wrong document. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have. I think a lot of this will look very familiar, and I know that the board wanted an opportunity to talk to council about any outstanding questions that they had before we finalize this, because the law goes into effect as of February 2nd, 2025, and we would like to try and have a legal notice posted before then, so we can get ahead of that. So that's all I have, really.
So, any initial questions or comments from the board on this?
Yeah, I said before, I'm not comfortable with going at this the way we are right now. There's too many moving parts and too many questions and potential interactions. So it really, what impact could this have? And okay, tell me, how many accessory apartments can someone have now under the bylaw? And what says that?
Accessory apartments, you can get an accessory apartment through special permit.
Yes.
Currently, one.
Could I get a second accessory apartment through a special permit?
It doesn't say anything to the contrary.
Right.
Contrary, rather.
What happens if I have an accessory apartment and then someone comes in looking for an ADU.
Yeah, that's one of the questions that there hasn't been a definitive answer.
Right, and I want to know what we're imposing on the town. You know, how many, if someone had some land or could build a building, how many units could they have? No, I'm not necessarily saying it's good or bad, but I want to know before I tell town meeting whether this is a good idea or not, or what it's going to do. Oh, and I noticed a mention of duplexes. We allowed duplexes in R20 with
Special permit.
special permit. How does that interact with this? Do you get you get one ADU, two ADUs by right? What do you get? I want to know. Before I just feel that we're more likely to succeed at town meeting when we have a proposal that we really know and can really speak to. I think that we have less exposure waiting until we can have good answers, maybe for the fall. I think that and council can tell us how much exposure we have. Because the law doesn't say anything about us changing our bylaw. So we're not violating the law by not changing it right now.
Right. We just won't
Okay,
have
okay.
control.
So part of a question for the board to consider is what happens with accessory dwelling units if we don't touch our zoning bylaw? When February 2nd comes, something changes. And I think the other, we would all want, if we don't propose a bylaw change before February 2nd, what happens between February 2nd and the time we do change our bylaw? In my understanding, I think council could probably tell us, basically my understanding is that we cannot enforce the special permit requirement.
Okay.
Beyond
Okay.
that,
Okay.
what are the possible
Yes, and
consequences?
I'd love to hear from him.
I didn't want to interject, but I can speak to a few of the questions that have been discussed
I think
so
the board
far.
would appreciate that.
So first and foremost, the amendment, which is to 40A Section 3, you probably know it as the Dover Amendment, will take effect on Sunday, February 2nd. And from that time on, the town has to allow ADUs that meet the statutory definition, so being not larger than 900 square feet or half of the gross floor area of the related principal structure, have to be allowed by right in a zoning district where single-family homes are also permitted by right. So, if you choose to do nothing for the interim, in essence, the building commissioner will have to issue building permits for ADUs if they're requested, because to refuse them would be in conflict with 40A Section 3 as it will be amended. You're quite right that this statutory amendment is not like the MBTA communities provision, which required the town to adopt a certain zoning bylaw. This amendment is simply saying that the town has to allow certain use by right and cannot unreasonably regulate them otherwise. And so the result will be in the interim that someone asking for a building permit for an ADU would have to be granted it by the building commissioner. This would be no different than a situation involving a religious use or an educational use. If it wasn't particularly permitted in a specific zoning district, typically the building commissioner has to have a conversation about how the zoning should apply to a protected use under 40A Section 3, even if the bylaw doesn't address it specifically. So there is a world where if you folks wait till the fall, and I'm not expressing an opinion on that, particularly that the town may have to issue building permits for ADUs with no review and no standards, which could be adopted in a bylaw. Now, certainly there is quite a bit of ambiguity because these statutory amendments are going to be effectuated by regulations issued by the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. Those regulations are out in draft form at the moment, and they held a public hearing on their draft last Friday, January 10th. I believe we are expecting to get final form regulations, by the end of the month, or, they've stated their intent to issue final regs, in time for the effective date of the law. And so, assuming that happens, it's only a few short weeks away that we will know exactly what the implementing regulations actually say in terms of specifically what does or does not constitute reasonable regulation under the statute. So I think I answered a few of your questions, but I might have missed some. So please, I'm here to help.
Yeah. You flew right through. You can't require a special permit, so a building permit will just be issued.
That's correct. So
the bylaw requires a special permit and a site plan review. The fact that we would make some sort of a finding that because of statute, whatever, the site plan is not required, but what keeps us from still needing to do a site plan review?
Sure. So the answer there is that if your bylaw does require site plan review as it's currently drafted, then you could continue to require that as long as it's implemented in a way that's consistent with the EOHLC's final regulations when they issue.
Yeah, I think to possibly put it in a to be slightly more specific, the bylaw requires a special permit, and the bylaw includes in the special permit process a site plan review. So one could argue that the fact that the bylaw requires special permit and which necessarily includes site plan review, the fact that we cannot require a special permit, does that requirement of the bylaw allow us to insist on a site plan review?
I think that's what he just said.
That's
Probably. He said
but
probably.
It's not the same thing though as saying the bylaw explicitly in the use table says site plan review. It doesn't.
That's
says
right.
special
I'm talking
permit.
about the bylaw, not
Right.
not the
Right. So
specific
the
piece.
bylaw, special permit in the bylaw implies site plan review.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think it requires concurrent site plan review or something.
Yes.
There's a you got to look at the words.
Yes.
But it.
Every special permit includes a site plan review.
So I argue that any applications that come in that want to build an ADU are going to be treated just like they would be if we passed something now. Except that we have to have some words in our decision to say why we're not doing a special permit.
Yeah. So I think the question in my mind would be, if we're not allowed to require a special permit, does the existing language of the bylaw allow us to insist on a site plan review?
I think so.
That's
We need, well,
I-
is someone going to argue that it doesn't?
I would argue that if I was somebody trying to get an ADU,
Yeah, well,
if it's implied and not explicitly stated, and Ethan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that we should clearly state the definition and something in the use table align site plan review to that use to be as clear as possible.
but I don't want to try to pass something in the spring, given the uncertainties, and then have to come back in the fall and do something else. I just, I think people are getting a little weary of the pushing forward too hard. We saw what happened at town meeting with a bylaw to allow accessory, was it accessory apartments, or anyway, apartments upstairs.
Mixed use.
And you saw what happened in town meeting. I just assume, I said what I assumed.
I've got well, on that point, I'm curious, if something was by right, what in the process of a site plan review would stop it from happening?
If it doesn't comply with the basic dimensional and like height standards of our bylaw, like it would have to comply. It's allowed, but it does need to fit.
And that's not part of
Setbacks
the building permit, that should be in the bylaw, okay.
Yeah, we usually, I mean, there's certain uses that are in the bylaw that it's very minimal that delegate site plan review to the building inspector. I think it's in like the campus overlay district, but generally the planning board oversees that, and it's a review on their end before getting a building permit.
Okay, and then I have a question for council, which is, what is known about the number of ADUs that's allowed by right? So it's just one per particular piece of property, or if you can fit multiple inside of the setbacks, are you allowed more than one, or how does it work?
Sure. So the minimum that's required for ADUs, again, that meet the statutory definition, it's a particular definition that they've now adopted. You get one by right. That much is known and is perfectly clear if you live in a zoning district which allows for single-family residential dwellings. Now, you of course have to meet all of the applicable dimensional controls, and so in many cases you couldn't have more than one anyway, due to setbacks and lot coverage, that sort of thing. The Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities has shared that it's their view that a town can elect to allow more than one ADU by special permit. So you could adopt a special permit process that allows for a second or even a third ADU, through a special permit process, but that the town doesn't have to do that. So the state is not viewing the amendment to 40A Section 3 as compelling a special permit process to allow, second or third ADUs on a lot, but it does empower towns to, adopt a special permit process to do that. One other possibility, and it is arising in cases of communities that have, the statutory ADUs, but potentially also accessory apartments, or maybe they permit larger ADUs, so larger than the 900 square feet. It is possible that you get a special permit for your larger ADU, and then you still get to build the protected ADU by right. The state has suggested that in the case of properties where they already have a larger ADU by special permit, something that predates this statutory amendment, those property owners would be allowed to apply for a permit for a protected use ADU, even though they already have one on their property. So they're sort of, because some communities allowed them, prior to the statutory amendment, including Grafton, there is a potential scenario out there where someone ends up with two ADUs on their property, whether you choose to allow them by special permit or not, because they have an existing, sort of pre-existing use as a larger ADU, and they're allowed to apply for the smaller protected use ADU by right, no matter what.
Yeah, I think it's probably worth noting that the statutory requirement is to allow one qualifying ADU by right per lot. And that is any lot that's in a zoning district that allows single-family homes. The lot may contain a multifamily home, a duplex or a three-decker or 8 units. No matter how many dwelling units are on the lot, one ADU is allowed by right, one and only one.
That particular language is potentially subject to modification by the regulations from EOHLC that I've mentioned, one of their defined terms, it defines principal dwelling, which would be, the primary use on the lot that dictates whether or not someone can have an ADU. The proposed definition in the draft regulations is very broad, so it includes single family homes, but it also includes just about any other configuration of dwelling units imaginable. So, for the moment, the draft regulations do suggest that it's not just single family homes that could apply for, a by right ADU, but it would be, 2 families, 3 families, multi-families. And I know this question was raised a few minutes ago. There is quite a lot of uncertainty at the moment. Who in a 3-family gets to apply for, to build the ADU? I think it's reasonably clear that the statute supports 1 ADU per lot, so that would be 1 per lot, not 1 per dwelling unit. But if you have 3 owners of a triple decker, I guess the question is we don't know who gets to apply or what the ownership structure would look like. That
First come, first serve.
Yeah.
First come,
Right,
first
so
serve
that-
on that.
Well,
In the absence of anything more precise, one could fault the legislature for not being explicit about saying 1 ADU for a single family dwelling on a single family on a lot. The legislature wasn't that precise. But we have to deal with, at the moment, we know what the law says, we know what the draft regs say, we don't know what the final regs are gonna say, which brings us back to the degree of uncertainty that we're facing at this moment.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, so,
Yeah.
and I don't want to put council on the spot, but I think that the strategy of site plan review and the definition is enough. I mean, it allows the board to be able to still have, again, as I've been saying, a degree of control. It helps the building inspector by vetting some of these ADU applications as well. And it complies with the law, and it's not a significant change to the bylaw. So unless, there's a glaring concern doing something like that from a legal perspective, maybe that's the direction that we need to go in, unless the board just doesn't want to touch it, and that's totally fine as well, but I think we should decide on that.
Bob?
yeah, I think I might have a little help with the, will a site plan be required? 1.3.2.3, Inspector of Buildings may issue a zoning permit without further review by the planning board for any use in any district that is designated by a Y in the use regulation schedule. 1.3.2.4, a zoning permit shall not be issued for any use other than those specified in 1.3.2.3 until a site plan has been submitted to, reviewed, and approved by the planning board in accordance with section 133. Currently, that would be an accessory apartment. I think that says, we're not talking about a place where it says Y now in 3.2.3.1. So 1.3.2.4 applies, and a site plan is required regardless. We also have the part about incorporating a site plan into a special permit, but that's a separate.
If, as the zoning bylaw is currently written, we can assert that an ADU by right requires site plan review, which is still a by right process. Yeah, Site plans are basically almost impossible to deny under site plan review. That's why it's considered a by right process.
They didn't used to be recognized at all in the law.
Yes, but that is the way it is.
Okay.
Site plan review is considered as of right. And if the language that Bob just quoted applies, and I think it does, then we should be covered in terms of what happens between February 2nd and the time we update the bylaw. We're covered to the extent of the board gets site plan review on an ADU.
Based on what Bob just read, we're
Yes.
covered. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we'll just leave it.
Right. The only other
it a why.
potential benefit, I mean, you know, in thinking about why would we want to do this now, as opposed to waiting for the regs to firm up? One was to get some additional clarity on the site plan review, but I don't think that's essential at this point, but based on what Bob just quoted. And the other is we could impose additional regulations like no short-term rental, buildings, you know, separation, and other dimensional requirements. The proposed requirement that the ADU not take up one parking place. You know, those, I mean, the sort of, you know, the essential element of the advantage to us for putting this forward now is pretty limited. And it's more than anything else, it's just to impose additional local regulations that would not be considered unreasonable. But
Maybe
given all the uncertainty and I think the sense that I'm getting from the board is we just don't feel compelled to try to get in ahead of this.
okay. Can I, Mr. Chair, ask a question through you to council?
Yes.
Is there any glaring issue if we just don't act, Ethan? If the board just decides to maybe go address the changes of any changes that they'd like to see at fall town meeting?
Sure. And so I have to admit, I had, in my review of your bylaw earlier today, I had missed this paragraph 1.3.2.4. And I agree that, you know, the language in there is perfectly clear that for a use that is not allowed, you know, by right in your current zoning table, you're going to get submitted to site plan review. And I think, you know, the full extent of site plan review that can be allowed, you know, isn't yet certain, but I am comfortable that anybody in a majority of your zoning districts would have to submit to site plan review. You know, I noticed looking at your zoning table that there are a couple of districts where accessory apartments are allowed by right. And so that might be an example of a zoning district where accessory apartments might get through without site plan review. But otherwise, I'm inclined to agree that the existing framework ensures site plan review in most cases. You know, and I think probably there is, based on what I've heard, little harm in waiting, you know, until the next town meeting cycle to pursue a zoning amendment if that's the board's determination. I've worked with a number of communities who are sort of struggling through the same process at the moment, and you know, the way of going about it is the full spectrum you can imagine. I've encouraged some communities to, you know, use their meeting time to, you know, figure out what their own priorities are, and then to draft a bylaw that reflects the level of review that they'd like to see for accessory dwelling units. And then once you have developed your priority list, after the fact, we can sort of have another conversation about how closely it aligns with the statute, and then how closely it aligns with the final regulations when they're issued. So, you know, that's certainly something you could engage in now. It's also something you could wait a little bit longer so that, you know, you can go through the exercise having the benefit of the final regulations before getting yourselves committed. As I said, I think you know, site plan review is contemplated in your bylaw, certainly for most districts in which an accessory dwelling could be permitted. And so I don't see any glaring problems at this time.
Bob?
Good. That's what I thought. This is a question to put in the question bin. Was I right in I think I saw that the draft said that the Water Supply Protection Overlay District doesn't apply. A requirement to comply with the Water Supply Protection Overlay District was not in effect for ADUs, and I'm interested, I don't like that. There's a reason to protect the Water Supply Protection Overlay District town-wide. I think we require that in everything in the table. So just, should we or shouldn't we, or, what's the story? Not tonight, but, a question, that struck me when I was, trying to make my way through our materials.
Just briefly, the reason for that, and there's, you see it in the floodplain and you see it in the Water Supply Protection Overlay District, that those two districts both have a special permit requirement, and the ADU has to be exempted from that. That is, which in the interim, until we change the bylaw, we would simply be unable to enforce the special permit requirement for either the floodplain or the Water Supply Protection District. We would not be able to enforce that special permit requirement on an ADU.
Okay, I haven't read that in 20 or 30 years, so.
Yeah, that's why that's in the draft, in the proposed.
Okay, anyway,
change.
it seems wrong somehow. We should protect the water supply, shouldn't we? I have a sympathetic audience.
I'm sure there's nobody in this room who is interested in protecting the water supply.
Well, no more than me, anyway.
Well, yeah. I'll raise
Okay.
my hand in the, I was one of the people that helped to create the Water Supply Protection
Yes.
Overlay District. I have a rather long history with that, but
Oh, but you're probably tired of it now.
somehow I think it's still meaningful.
Yes.
But-
Shall we move on? Do we
All right,
have?
so it sounds like we're set on the direction for ADUs, is that, we're okay with what will happen starting February 2nd. We will continue to make some plans to think about how we ultimately want to regulate that, but we will know more once the draft HLC regulations come out. We'll know more as time goes on, but for now, I think the board is comfortable leaving it alone.
Just so I'm clear, no action because the language in 1.3.2.4 covers us. Just leave it for now. Final regs come out, we address in the fall.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
One of
So
the
moved.
key things we'll want to think about is how do we want to regulate these ADUs?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, all right, let's think about that.
But we don't need to, we don't.
Not
need to-
tonight.
Right. We have time to.
You've got
we have-
some people that,
Yep. Oh, I didn't say anything on this, but I just agree. My biggest concern was making sure that we were covered with the site plan review, which we are, from what it sounds like anyway. And the rest of it, there's enough questions that make trying to guess hard.
All right.
All right, with that,
Fine.
it is now 7:30. We have two public hearings. Evan, you're here for the other bylaw idea? Yeah, we'll probably want to spend a few minutes talking about that, so if we, I don't know how quickly we can get through the two very closely related special permits that we're beginning tonight.
yeah. There are, we certainly have an open requirement for the review by our engineer on both. So there are open questions, so we're not gonna be making any decision tonight.
Right.
So maybe we don't need a long, show us what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And we'll get into it a little deeper.
And Mr. Chair, we do have the two action items that relate to these applications that I believe when this had previously come up,
Yeah.
that same question, we needed to do them before opening the public hearing.
Before what?
before opening the public hearings, we need to do the action items that relate to fee waivers for them.
I move that we approve, waiving the, notification fee for, SB 2024-11/SPA. I'll put the other one in the same motion.
Sure. Doesn't hurt.
And in the for the application for a special permit 2024-12/SPA.
Bob, you did say notification fee. We cannot waive the legal ad, we can waive the special permit application review fee. I'm
That's what
assuming
I-
what you meant.
That's what I said.
Okay.
Yes.
With that understanding, I second.
Moved and seconded that the application fee be waived for the two special permit applications. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Delamole,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. The application fee is waived. Let's open the public hearing here for 77 Snow Road.
Sure. Pursuant to sections 1.5.7 and 1.3.3 of the Town of Grafton zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a public hearing on Monday, January 13th, 2025, commencing at 7:30 PM in Conference Room A of the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, to consider an application for a special permit and site plan approval request for construction of a new water treatment plant and associated infrastructure components needed to address the PFAS concentrations present in the public water supply located at 77 Rear Snow Road / East Street, shown as Grafton Assessor's Map 28 Lot 2. Said property is located in a medium-density residential R20 and water supply protection overlay WSPO zoning district. The applicant owner is the Grafton Water District. A copy of the application plan is available for public inspection at the planning department during regular business hours or on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton-ma.gov on the Planning Department Development Projects webpage.
All right. Start this, Fiona.
Sure. So, thanks, Mr. Chair. So this application, I'll be brief. It's a PFAS water treatment plant proposed by the Grafton Water District. Folks in town might be aware that PFAS is a growing issue in many communities, but particularly in Grafton. Testing levels have warranted the development of these types of facilities. These facilities will be on the same lots as the current facility there will be two buildings on the lot, but the new proposal will just focus on treating PFAS. I did a review. I did not see any significant issues with this application. It was just a couple of nitpicky things about site plan, but there really wasn't any anything that I would flag. I think I'll probably just stop there because really I did not have much commentary and I think it's relatively straightforward, but I'm happy to answer any questions about my review after I give the applicant an opportunity to speak.
Yeah, you have kind of a presentation that sort of covers both projects.
We do. Yep, we have a very brief introductory slide deck that sort of prefaces both sites, and then we can split into East Street if we're doing it first.
Yeah, sorry, I'll pull that up.
And just while Fiona's pulling that up, we can introduce the team. I'm Brian E. Angus with Ty and Bond.
Excuse me, I'm Tom Mahana from Ty and Bond. We have several members from Ty and Bond also that are out there in TV land. Also here with the Water District is Dave Erickson, as you referenced earlier, the Water Superintendent. And coming to us live from North Carolina is Matt Pearson, also with the Water District. So we have a full team here that can answer any technical questions you have. I'll just give a very brief overview, and I'm going to turn it over to Bryony, and she'll walk you through the project. So, we're here for, as you would reference, construction of two PFAS facilities at the Water District's Worcester Street and East Street facilities. Those are both existing facilities. The Worcester Street location
Can you
is,
advance?
yeah, I'm just gonna fly through them very, very quick.
Keep going.
Okay, so Worcester Street is located 98 Worcester Street. So for bearings, for people who have not been to the site, that's located behind the shopping plaza, behind the subway. That's the Water District's main access to it. That station, pump station, we rebuilt, constructed a new station there a couple of years ago in its current location. The site, the new treatment plant will be constructed adjacent to that pump station. The East Street facility is located at 77 Snow Road. That's an existing treatment plant that treats two wells at that location. That treatment facility was constructed approximately 20 years ago to remove iron and manganese in the water. So Water District, so the permanent capacity for Worcester Street is just over 1 million gallons a day, and the East Street facility.
Advance, Fiona.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just let me know.
I'm going too
No, it's
fast. And then the East Street facility has a permitted capacity of about 1.6 million gallons a day. So both locations will have PFAS detected in the water supply, so it requires treatment. So we're in the process of completing the pilot study that we've conducted at both locations to determine what the treatment process will be for both locations. So it's going to be a very similar treatment approach at both locations. Worcester Street could require a little bit different type of treatment than what's already existing at East Street. So with that, I will turn it over to Bryony.
Sure. Fiona, can you go to the next one, please? The next two slides just give a little bit more information about site conditions. So Worcester Street, as Tom mentioned, 2 points of access behind the shopping plaza, and then from Doris Drive. Both of these, the most complicated thing for the board is keeping track of which project is which. And I will say the difference is, my slide's on Worcester Street. So Worcester Street is in the R20 and the Water Supply Overlay District. And then if you go to the next slide, East Street also has floodplain overlay district. And I know there might have been a comment about that, which I can address when we dive into the applications. And then just zip forward to the next one, please, Fiona. So why we're here, so both the projects require site plan review just for site disturbance. Both require special permits as a public water utility project in the residential zone and compliance with Section 7, which is the water supply overlay. East Street, as I mentioned, also requires compliance with Section 6. We're not requesting any waivers, but I know there was a comment about whether or not we needed one that I can address, and we're appreciative to the board for granting the fee waiver. So that's introductory, and I believe we are in the East Street public hearing now. And I will, as the chair mentioned, I will keep it pretty brief, given that we are in receipt of comments from the town planner that we plan to address in writing, and I can address any of them that you want me to tonight. We are awaiting comments from the peer reviewer on both the applications, the drawings, and the stormwater report. We will respond to those in writing before the next hearing. And as Tom mentioned, we have folks here who can answer any questions about the site plans, layouts. These are pretty benign projects. Both are, single story, 5,000 to 6,000 square foot buildings with some water main construction. I have to keep reminding myself which one we're talking about. So East Street, it will also require a notice of intent. That will be submitted tomorrow. And happy to answer any questions. And Fiona also has the site plans that we can speak to and pull up if the board has any questions.
Any questions at this point from the board?
So,
Not on this one.
go ahead.
Greg?
Mine is, just, there's 5 wells. Do these 2 treatment facilities cover all 5 for the whole district, or how does it work?
No, there's, the water district's actually going to be, constructing a third treatment plant to treat the Trinity Ave, Villette Street wells. So this project is just for the 3 wells. Worcester Street's a single source, East Street is 2 sources.
And these are the ones that have had PFAS detected, right? So they're
Correct.
being addressed first, but there is another project to treat the remainder, right? Because if
Yeah.
you do this and then something else turns up.
Correct,
Kind of
but that's
backwards,
not a
right?
project that we're involved in, and I don't know if Dave or Matt wants to add any more on that.
Can you give me an idea of the amount of water the third site, the Trinity, provides or is able to provide?
I'm not familiar.
How you doing? Dave Erickson, superintendent. That site will produce a little over 1 million gallons a day also, when we can,
So
can
it's a
run it.
significant fraction of the.
Yeah, so we have that off because of
Yeah.
the iron and manganese problem down there now. I mean, we can use it if we have to for an emergency. We keep it, it's not mothballed, we take samples monthly, but we just don't pump it into the system, so.
You know, there were problems with it back early on, years ago. Some sort of contamination on the site.
Oh, that was Follett Street.
Oh, Phillips, okay.
That was the dioxin for.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I make a recommendation that we officially open the public hearing for Worcester Street as well, because there seems to be a lot,
Well,
kind of talking about them at the same time.
should we have 2 hearings open at once?
I think that,
I don't
I mean,
recall
we're
that we've
talking
ever
about
tried
them
that.
interchangeably, so I just don't want to be talking about Worcester Street when it's not officially open yet, so I guess maybe we can just bear that in mind.
I think you can discuss them both, but then you open another hearing and then, go from there. Once you, by the way, there was no vote taken to open the hearing.
No, we don't.
You don't do
We
that?
don't vote to open our hearings.
Okay,
We-
so that's,
but
that hit me.
Some boards do have a practice of voting to open hearings, but
Yes,
we've
and I
never-
always wondered how you could vote to open a meeting when you weren't convened as a meeting.
It wasn't, it's not, it's a hearing, no.
Predated you, Ray.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I mean, you can discuss both, you have to deal with one at a time, so.
Yeah, I think you can I agree, maybe one at a time does make sense, but I think you technically you can have them both open at the same time if you choose.
Let's do it. So we can go home.
Yes. Let's
All right.
open the Worcester
Yeah.
Street
See if you
hearing.
can catch
makes
what's
sense.
different about this one from the last. Pursuant to, we'll switch pages. Pursuant to sections 1.5.7 and 1.3.3 of the Town of Grafton zoning bylaws, the planning board will hold a public hearing on Monday, January 13th, 2025, commencing at 7:30 p.m. in the conference room A of the Grafton Memorial Municipal Center, 30 Providence Road, to consider an application for a special permit and site plan approval request for construction of a new water treatment plant and associated infrastructure components needed to address the PFAS concentrations present in the public water supply located at 98 Worcester Street, shown on Grafton Assessor's Map 46, Lot 50A. Said property is located in a medium-density residential R20 and water supply protection overlay WSPO zoning district. The applicant owner is the Grafton Water District. A copy of the application plan is available for public inspection at the planning department during regular business hours or on the Town of Grafton website at www.grafton-ma.gov on the Planning Department Development Projects webpage.
All right. We are officially discussing both projects.
And everything that's gone on so far should be considered as included in both.
Yeah. So,
So we there's not much additional to say about Worcester Street. It is very similar. I think the comments from the town planner were quite similar. There's, small differences, in both that I can address. In both the applicant and the engineer statements are up front in the applications to the town planner, so I think they are included in here.
Okay.
There was a comment about providing a report for cut and fill analysis, which we can provide some more detail on. There are some elements of what in your comments that the board might occasionally ask for about hours of cut and fill activities and proposed route of transporting materials that we may not, that would be subject to the contractor, but we can provide a little bit more information, and I don't think we need a waiver from this unless.
If I may, Mr. Chair, yeah, you can, you can opt to not provide that information. I think my primary concern was with Worcester Street, because you're going to be going through Doris Drive, and
Okay.
if there's trucks going and, moving a, decent amount of earth, we will just trying to plan for that.
Yeah, I thought I saw in the plans that the construction entrance was the Worcester Street end of it,
Should be.
behind Subway and stuff.
That's correct. We have to make the sewer connection into Doris Drive, so that's the plan. That the construction activity will be limited to that work, but the main, access to the site will be through the existing location coming through the shopping plaza.
The access road becomes a private road on your property, public way, the Doris Drive. Doris Drive's a public way, right?
Correct.
And when it gets to your property line, it continues on in.
Right.
But it's a private way at that point.
Right. It's right. The water district, I believe.
Yeah.
Obtained
We own that.
property.
Yeah, we own
Yeah.
that.
And your other access through 100 is partly private road on your property, and then a easement
Yes, correct.
across 100's parking lot.
Yes, it's an easement, Bob.
I believe Matt's answering that. Yes.
So I'm not sure if there are additional comments from the town planner that you'd like us to address verbally.
My only other comment was, obviously you don't need a traffic analysis, so maybe you just formally request a waiver from that for both of the projects, just for record keeping purposes, and I believe that's the only other concern I had.
Yeah, maybe I could just add just a little bit of information regarding that. So both facilities, they'll be fully automatic as far as operation wise. So district currently goes to each location, particularly to East Street. They operate, full scale treatment filtration there now. Worcester Street, both sites are visited every day, hour or two or so a day. The number of trips won't necessarily increase, but the amount of time that the water district has to spend at each facility will increase now because of the additional treatment. But you won't see, and the butters won't see a substantial change as far as the number of trips to each location on a daily basis.
Bob?
Just hesitate to ask, but I know that there's somebody out there worried about the current process moving towards building a fairly large housing complex right next to you on Snow Road. And do you have anything to say about it does or it doesn't interact with your needs or your situation or this requirement?
No,
I
I
can speak
mean,
on that.
we have
Yeah,
a 400-foot
Yeah.
radius around the well, which basically abuts the back of the Stop and Shop buildings, so,
Yeah, and it goes right to the project's
yeah.
border. But you don't think that there's that's what, your 400-foot circle or whatever it is.
Yes,
And that's just
It's outside of
what
that,
it needs to be.
yeah.
Right, anything else at this point? I think, as was said earlier, we are primarily awaiting the peer review,
Yes.
and then the applicant's response to the peer review. Do we have a sense of when we're expecting to receive the peer review?
Yes, I believe there was a confirmation from Graves that it would be ready by the next meeting, but Natalia might have something a little bit more substantive than that.
Natalia? Natalia?
Meeting.
We didn't catch
Can
that.
you hear me? Oh, sorry. Yes, I was just confirming what Fiona said. Graves has promised to have the peer review ready for the next meeting, the board's next meeting.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just two quick
Yes.
things out of curiosity. One, do we have an understanding of how long it will take for these to come online? Or,
Sure. I could give you an idea of what the overall schedule is. So this project, the Water District received a state revolving fund loan for this project. So that program, we have to kind of follow the regulatory schedule dictated by that program. So we anticipate being out to bid later this summer with the project. We have to be under contract with the general contractor by the end of October. So depending on contractor schedule, whatever, once that's selected, construction could start sometime around this time next year. So that would be late 2025 or early 2026. And these projects, unfortunately, now are taking 2 years to complete and be online. So we're looking at sometime in probably early 2028 is when the facilities will be online and operational. The nice part about the project and the construction aspect of it, it will not impact these wells. So the Water District will be able to continue to operate the wells while the construction of the facilities is continuing. But they are long projects.
and then to the Water District, how do people monitor this in the meantime, right? Like the level of whatever PFAS or whatever.
Yeah, we test, well, certain wells we test monthly, other wells we test quarterly. And,
And
And
where,
then do you have a requirement to notify everyone if it's over a certain?
yeah,
level,
our
like-
Worcester Street well went over, so we had to do a public notification to everybody. We sent out the mailers saying
Yeah.
that we went over. Since then, we've tested it twice since then, and it's gone back down below the maximum of
Okay.
20. We haven't been running it. Actually, it's been, we had the well pulled and sent out for maintenance, so we haven't been able to run it even if we wanted to. But we will, like I said, the summer times we will have to run it. We don't have a choice. And like I said, we monitor it, and we'll be putting the results on our website and getting it out there for people to see what they are. But hopefully it stays below 20 parts per trillion that the DEP is requiring. So
I'm pleased to see that website and the responsive.
yeah, we're gonna have a new. It should be hopefully by the end of this month. We'll have a new, more user-friendly website.
Yeah, but there's also, on social media, there's some response to questions.
Yes, yeah.
Is there anything else we need to do for this hearing? If not, a continuation to the next meeting, the 27th?
Yes.
Can if the intent is for us, though, to respond to the Graves comments, if we're getting them on the 27th, we might as well not come on the 27th. But we can request that continuance depending on when we get it.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
You can request another.
Yeah, I don't want to rush
Continuance.
things. I mean,
I would
you-
like to
you
rush
guys
things, but I don't want to
take
respond in
take as
Yeah.
much time as you
Yeah.
need.
Well, yeah, I think her point is that if Graves says it can't get it done, there's nothing to talk about. So yeah, I think we can coordinate and I can send you another continuance request as well. So
Yeah, so for now, we'll assume that we'll continue the 27th, subject potentially to change.
Great.
Do you're scheduled with the Concom, or you're already with the Concom on the one project, and not on the other?
They, no, they both have notices of intent going in tomorrow, I believe. Is that,
Oh, going in tomorrow.
yeah.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
submitting them tomorrow. I don't know what the next hearing date is, but
Does anybody on Zoom know what Concom hearing date we're shooting for?
Matt, you had your hand up a moment ago. Did you have anything? Matt,
I just wanted to say that, yeah, put us on the agenda for the next meeting, and then I did talk to Jeff Walsh last week. Had to talk to him on some other issues, and he did say he'd already glanced at stuff and didn't see any red flag, but obviously he has to go through his calculations, so he understands our time frame. So I expect him to get stuff to us earlier than later. So I hope. We've had a great working relationship over the years.
okay.
So I'll do it separately just for clean votes to grant the applicant's upcoming written request to continue this hearing till January, this hearing being SP 2024-11/SPA for 77 Snow Road until January 27, 2025 at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Delamole.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously.
And I'll make another motion to continue the hearing for 98 Worcester Street, SP 2024-12/SPA until January 27th at 7:30 p.m.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Wood.
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger.
Aye.
Mr. Delamole.
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman.
Aye.
And Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We are continued for 2 weeks.
Thank you very much.
thank you very much.
Look forward to
Craig,
getting this wrapped up.
requests over there. I think
Good night.
might have put them over there. I could.
No, it's just the two announcements for the public hearing.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Need the official at some point or email.
Yeah.
We'll give everybody a moment to clear out here.
Cart.
Yeah.
It's living in here.
And
We figured out.
since we have a guest here for one other agenda item, we'll take that one up next before we loop back on the others. And this one would be a request regarding a noise and odor bylaw.
Yes.
Me first? Yes.
Hello.
Perfect. So I think everyone is aware of the issues that were recently experienced in town regarding odor in particular at the Feedback Earth site. In response to comments from the public, the select board has, that they're trying to push for bylaw updates that will cover those types of nuisance issues and make sure that we basically don't have a repeat, and also address noise concerns, nuisance noise concerns. So Evan, I won't speak for Evan, but a draft bylaw from another nearby town in Central Mass was submitted as a sample of something that the select board has been looking at, and something for us to consider as we kind of figure out what this is going to look like. And Evan is here to speak on and relay comments from the select board. So that's all I've got.
Bob, you?
Yeah, well, a question I've had that sort of above this is zoning bylaw rather than a general bylaw. What I want to know is if we enact this, does it protect existing uses or existing permitted uses by being pre-existing?
Yes.
Because this isn't
That's-
exactly a use, but I don't know the extent of that protection.
Right, so I think the argument could be made that since if we pass this as a zoning bylaw, that anything that was pre-existing is grandfathered in, right? Doesn't apply.
That's,
And so that's part of the conversation about which direction to take this in, because long-standing existing businesses that aren't generating complaints and nuisances, we would not want them to be adversely impacted, tangentially from what we're trying to accomplish. So it seemed like the general bylaw approach was a very broad approach, which may have unintended consequences that I don't think that myself or the board was looking to enact. We really were looking to, or at least the conversation as I recall it is much more strategic in that we're trying to protect the community from new uses and also give a mechanism to actually be able to apply standards to any nuisance that we have in the community, right? So, and what I mean by that, I can see Bob's face. We already have in place two different mechanisms to enforce either odor or noise, and they both come via the state DEP, right? So those already exist, and those metrics are already in place. However, they are, again, more of a broad brush approach, and requires quite a bit of coordination with the state in order to actually utilize them in any meaningful way. So what our discussion centered around in the staff offices as well as at the board level is, can we put something in place that protects the community from these type of nuisances moving forward? So that said, the bylaw that I put in front of the select board and also have brought here this evening is actually from the town of Medway. Medway, I think there's a ton of them out there that you can find in different varying degrees. Of all the ones that I had looked at, Medway's, in my opinion, was the best. It's also not specifically only Medway. There's a few other communities that have the exact same looking language. Yeah, which is how that works.
Are they all zoning?
I did not. Let me back up. So I believe I found a couple that were general bylaws, but they were also they seem to be quite dated. So they probably were established in the last iteration of whatever community's bylaws they did.
On the zoning versus general, just some thoughts in my mind is that for example, Feedback Earth, just to use that as the top of mind example, if some other business purchases the land, purchases the permit that we've already granted, they could still do stuff that was within the special permit purview that could still cause odors for the town if this is a zoning bylaw, that they're still grandfathered in because it's under the same permit we already did.
But here's the rub. So no, because the DEP already has a standard in place that they can't violate, right?
True. Yes.
We would it would just, the process would be different, but the outcome would be the same. And so since those the standard for DEP already exists for anything that's already permitted, we'll call it.
Yes.
We would just use a different mechanism to get to the same result.
My point is it no longer is a town enforceable thing, it's a state enforceable thing. And it goes by the state's standards, which could be different than what we put in our bylaw.
So just to, and not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but on any odor complaint, the town does have enforcement authority as granted by the DEP. In the Feedback scenario, we did not, because there were other things afoot and the state had asked us not to do anything at a local level. So that winds up being a little bit of an outlier. However, what I have seen in reading this Medway example or any of the other ones I found online is that you are able to get much more granular in your local than you can in what the state uses as their broad brush stroke. And so part of what I liked in, again, this example that we sent over is that they didn't create, different bylaws for different things. They just lump it together as an environmental standards package. And they combined kind of any kind of nuisance that I think you could be looking at, whether that be ambient noise or odor. And I don't know if you want to talk about each of them separately, But one of the things that we run into with noise is that enforcing noise under DEP guidelines is 10 decibels over ambient. And so what we have to do is go and take ambient sound readings multiple times over a course of time to kind of get that baseline, and then you can be 10 decibels over that. If you look at the way that they treat it in this particular standard, in my opinion, it's much more finite, and it talks about octave bands, times of day, right? All these things that we kind of are missing when we just say 10 decibels over ambient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just wondering, it occurred to me, the special permit that currently allows what they were doing apparently, or might we not go back and see exactly what that was issued for? You know, what they said they were going to do and so on, and only somebody else doing that would get a special permit. It's not just that it's a OLI use. You think so?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so that.
I do. I think it, again, the idea of the zoning bylaw, it's much more of a scalpel in that I think you can really create something that fits with the town of Grafton as opposed to just relying on that DEP that's overarching, I guess is how I would put it. The other, just one other fly in the ointment to put out as we discuss this. So the regulations that DEP has says that a town can adopt local odor ordinances with the approval of DEP. And so one of the reasons why I liked some of the examples that we found online is they've already presumably been approved by DEP. So it really wouldn't be a really tough road to hoe as opposed to kind of trying to start our own and get DEP's approval on that. So.
Yeah, but just note that the Medway example that was posted to our meeting materials, I looked up the current Medway zoning bylaw, and they have apparently made a few changes compared to, they've added some more detail, which is probably, I mean, if we want to go forward to that, we'd probably want to look at that.
Yes,
as an example of what Medway currently has in place.
Right.
And
just to be clear, you know, at the select board meeting, the discussion and the intent, I believe, is to bring this forward to the planning board with the assumption that the planning board has expertise in crafting zoning bylaws and would be able to take this and maybe find other examples you like better or things you don't like and morph it. It was not a, here's what the board's looked at, you should just adopt this.
right, so there is no proposal on the table that the town adopt what exactly Medway has done.
Right.
Which would seem to be appropriate. But
Right.
yes, I think I would look at what Medway currently has in place. I would find some other fairly recent examples of towns that have done this via zoning, you know, to get a better sense of sort of the breadth of possibilities, as it were.
Right. And just to kind of piggyback on that, just so that the board is aware, we do have a very good working relationship with central office of DEP. So, you know, we can pull on their expertise and have them help us navigate this so that we don't find ourselves in the situation that we were over the past year or two.
I do have some background in some of this, having done engineering and working with sound research. I was amused by how much we're putting in a zoning bylaw. Maybe it would be, part of it would be in an appendix rather than in line, but because you got 7 pages here of that.
Yep.
But a little amused. Hertz, a unit of frequency of change in the cycle of a sound wave. Why don't we just say cycles per second like we used to when I was in school?
Unit of frequency used to measure
And,
the number of sound wave cycles that occur per second is
And if you're gonna say decibel is a unit of measure of the intensity of sound, probably we wanna, maybe there's someplace we say as defined by, it's a ratio to something. And somewhere it's defined, probably at IEEE.
Yep, those are the kind of details we'll want to look closely at.
I just,
Assuming we
I
go
went,
forward with it.
I said, but a lot of familiar stuff.
Yes.
I'm not sure we're gonna get this on the Springtown meeting.
And that understandable. We had talked about the planning board having other things in the queue, but wanting to get this
Yeah, well,
inside
we
queue
might,
moving
If
forward.
we don't start this work, we'll never finish it.
Right.
yeah, that's true. This needs a little less research time, but I think it's gonna take a little time
Yeah.
to research.
I have two other thoughts too. First off, D1, it talks about like all the types of odors that are air pollution, all activities involving smoke, fly, ash, dust, fumes. So any activity that would involve dust, by reading this without cross-referencing the CMR, but it feels like it would be in violation. Like for example, in a contractor's yard, dumping a little bit of stuff. Some dust goes in the air, doesn't even leave their property, but does that in violation? The
Yeah.
read of it kind of seems like it is, but
Yeah, but I think that again, the rest of that paragraph is which causes damage to human health,
Yeah.
animals,
No,
vegetation. So you have to be able to show that there's an impact.
yeah, no,
So it's a little dusty, and I don't like being dusty. Is different than there's a direct corollary
No,
to
yeah,
something. But I take your point.
The balance on that.
Right.
And then
Right.
the other thought I have that I would be very interested in the current select board's opinion on is, should the planning board have waiver authority for this, or should this be as basically as written as we bring it? So should we be able to waive certain requirements in this within the scope of what the state level laws and DP allow? But is there anything that we should be allowed to waive? Like if it's a single business that's small in the middle of a giant industrial park, maybe we can lighten some of this. I don't know, but that's just a
Okay. We did not get that granular at that meeting, but we can certainly look to have that discussion further.
I think it pretty well lays out a scheme, and it might refine the language or make the language sound like our language, but
And it's geared around somebody complaining, right? Like, so
Oh,
these are the standards.
a lot of it, yeah.
This is the standard. Somebody
Yeah.
complains. If they're 2,500 feet or less,
Right.
then it catalyzes the test. And then if you test over the allowable limits, then
Right.
you have to change your behavior.
Right.
Is that kind of the whole?
Yep, that's really the crux of it, and the same thing with noise. It's all based on a complaint structure. Although I do believe within this bylaw there is some presumption that the zoning enforcement officer or building official can also start that process. So we don't have to wait for a resident complaint. We can also a town employee can observe.
Yeah, it says, the Medway bylaw, just for example, says the building commissioner may determine that a noise is problematic or an odor, so that it's sort of, that's sort of the first thing it says under, I just happen to be looking at odors here. The building commissioner may determine that an odor is disturbing, offensive, or objectionable and is subject to investigation. And if it is determined to be in violation of this bylaw, may take appropriate enforcement action, blah, blah, blah. So that kind of, it makes the building commissioner, in our case, the zoning enforcement officer. I don't know, I think sometimes we use the term building commissioner, but more often the zoning enforcement officer, but in any case.
It's always the same person
Job title
anyways.
is, it's the same thing. So we basically, they sort of have the primary responsibility for investigating and enforcing. And however they decide to take that on, whether it's in response to a complaint or on their own initiative. It's really, that's sort of the point of enforcement for this.
And I don't know all the details of Feedback Earth, but essentially that was the some of the challenge was there weren't these kind of standards and rules to go by when people started to come in.
Yes, so the feedback is kind of the catalyst and standard, but it also was much more complicated than
Okay.
we needed the enforcement arm being the Attorney General's office in that particular case, which added a whole different layer than I think what's contemplated here. It also was permitted via the state, so they had a different regulatory authority than, say, the construction yard or the agritourism or whatever we're talking about. Those are much more local issues. That, because of the state's permitting over the combustion that they were doing on site. That's not the right word. I can't remember what they called it.
Processing.
But because there was that layer, it kind of took it outside of this realm. So I don't want to use that as the gold standard for how we're going to try to stop it, because I think we still would have been in the same process with the Attorney General's office and DEP. And the legislature and things. But I think that barring it getting to the level where we have a business in town that is also licensed via the state for, doing this type of work, we'd be able to enforce that entirely locally, either by resident complaint or by us just, monitoring. Does that answer your question, or did I go way off of the
No, that makes
rails? Okay.
I'm actually quite interested in the noise. One of the very first things when I came on the board involved a noise issue up there on Creeper Hill Road. Quite close to this, I think, quite close to this location. And, that's when I found out that we didn't have any noise law. And every time that something comes along, about every 4 years, I say, we need... and,
yeah, we do. It would be
that's
helpful.
the end of it.
Yes, it would be helpful not only for the residents that we have something in place, but also for the staff that have to enforce these type of things, to have finite guidelines in which to say, this is no bueno or this is fine. We don't really have that. The ambient, the noise regulation that we have, that we've been using, works, but it also, there's a lot of variable involved in that process. So
You already have a sound level meter?
we do.
A proper professional
A
one.
proper professional one that is
Not this.
no, it has a self-calibration, separate unit, and the whole thing. I do things right, Bob. I get the
Well,
whole thing.
Do we have anyone on staff that meets
But
the?
I had a lot of conversation with the previous user of same.
Yes.
Nah,
No, it's high. It's a high-end unit, and
Good.
it's very reliable. We just have to have finite regulations in which to
yeah.
utilize them.
There's probably a little bit of training on the proper way to take measurements. I remember we did stuff in an anechoic chamber, but it had to be arranged so that you got the sound right and all.
Do we have anyone on staff currently that would meet the line item that says a qualified acoustical consultant whose qualifications such
No.
as this? No.
No,
you'd
and
bring
we
somebody
won't
I-
probably ever.
I was guessing
Right.
that.
And so that's something to look at, right? Of whether or not we have that, or however we implement having that. So I think that'll kind of, hopefully that comes out as the conversation evolves. But yeah, that would be problematic.
Well, that would be somebody you hire probably for a case.
Probably, yep. If it got to that level, again, part of this is hopefully creating some kind of incremental process where we don't get to that issue. But there's also provision in here, and it's something I think the town would consider if we started to run into noise complaints on a more frequent basis, which would be remote monitoring. And so you can have the establishment or whatever is causing the sound acquiesce to, you just set up this meter that runs for days at a time, and you use that to catalog so that we're not doing spot checks in which they may or may not be creating noise.
That's a different piece of equipment too.
It is, but it's really not that.
Yeah.
The technology has gotten so much smaller and less expensive that it's pretty attainable. I think if we ever got to that point.
Yes.
Well, let's get something.
If we end up including noise in this, which we probably will, this sort of fulfills one of the unfinished tasks that the bylaw study committee a couple of years ago had. We talked about a noise bylaw, kind of in the context of the general bylaws, obviously, and we felt that it was a topic that deserved a considerable amount of attention, more than our committee could give it. So here we are now. Bringing that back. The bylaw study committee recommended that the town follow up by spending some time focused on a noise bylaw, and here we are.
Yeah, that's exactly why I'm here, Dave. I remember that specifically.
Yes, it's probably worth pointing out that in the general bylaws there is a construction noise element,
Right.
which we might look at that from the point of view of, would the zoning bylaw cover that? And I suspect the idea of a general bylaw covering construction noise, which would be pretty much apply across town regardless, might be best kept. Because construction noise is a particular thing that is arguably somewhat, it's related to general, to the noise bylaw, the zoning bylaw here, but it might not be the same thing. But something to keep in mind.
That reminds me of, we've had sound issues with a contractor's yard up in North Grafton. We did
Donahue Lane.
Donahue Lane.
Donahue Lane.
Yeah.
affecting the people right behind them. But that's like, all right, they're doing something now, not continuously. Okay, well,
Do I take it that we have a consensus on the board to follow up on this?
so moved.
Yes.
Excellent.
That's it.
Let me know how it goes.
Fiona, we'll have this all done next week.
No, and
As
you
soon
know,
as she
obviously,
finishes a course in acoustics.
This is
Acoustics.
this will
and
be
all
a
this.
very interesting learning exercise for me. A lot of this stuff is very technical. So yeah, but yeah, I think, Mr. Chair, if I may just, if the board, I think it's a lot to delve into this evening in terms of details. If the board has comments to share and we can discuss, I can work on things and I can pull samples, additional samples and more current examples as Dave mentioned. So I'll do my due diligence in the background, but if there's particular comments or suggestions about how this can be Graftonized, just send them to me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Send us your write-up tomorrow by noon.
Yeah.
I do think that other examples that are reasonably, as thorough as this might be helpful to suggest questions.
yeah, and I have a whole bunch of them, Fiona, so
Okay. Yeah.
I can help with that.
Yeah, and to one point, to Graftonize thing, this is something that I saw quite a bit of when we were reviewing the general bylaws, is people would take, cut and paste a bylaw from another town into Grafton, and they wouldn't use the same, the terminology would be inconsistent. In some cases, they would include things that, that was appropriate for the other town, but it's just,
Right.
We did a fair amount of editing of the general bylaws just to achieve some consistency and have it, basically tailored to Grafton. And I would expect the same thing here.
Every 20-story building or more must have certain fire escapes and stuff, but no, we don't have any.
Right.
Like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's too easy to cut and paste without thinking about how does this fit in Grafton's bylaws.
Excellent. Well, I'd love to
Don't
stay
get
and
me
chat,
started
but-
on that.
I was gonna say, it's time to go.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions before I leave.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. That was a dumb move on my part. All right. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
See ya.
Thank you.
See you.
Thanks, Evan.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
All righty, moving on. We've got one more discussion item, the action item status from the planning board's open space and recreation plan action items.
Yes. I can give an overview of that, Dave, unless you want
Yeah.
to.
Nope, I think, you've filled in,
Yeah.
your take on the status of each of the action items. And question for the board is, do we want, is there anything that we would like stated differently?
Yeah, but pretty much. I mean, for those who might not have seen this before, it's a matrix, an implementation matrix where we use to track the open space and recreation action item status. So each action item that's assigned to the planning board, we do an annual report to the open space and rec committee. And it's informative and helps when planning for future our open space and rec plans about what's reasonable and what's not, kind of what's stalled and why, what we need to push harder on. I did, as Dave mentioned, fill this out with the current status. Most are kind of longer range things that take, working with consultants and drafting bylaws and public hearings and such, that it takes a bit of time. The first one's completed, but the rest are in progress, or almost complete for the most part. There's a couple of recommendations that were made toward the end there that I marked as stalled. I'm happy to elaborate. I think I tried to provide as much detail as possible for the board so that you can kind of get a sense of why it's stalled. But I'm happy to answer any questions or talk about any particular action item that anyone has any questions about.
When I read these over, I didn't see anything that struck me as being inappropriate or incorrect or anything else. The only comment I'll make is that stalled is not an official status of the open space and reg. That will be reported as in progress, but the commentary makes it clear.
Sure.
I have a very limited number of labels that we can attach to these.
Sure. Yeah,
But I'm fine with the way you've got this. When I receive this officially for inclusion in my status table, I will make sure that it aligns with the statuses that we actually report.
Sure. Yeah, I think I just that's a good point. I just wanted to make it clear that I think that one will probably be. No, there won't be much movement on that. Just from my conversations with regional entities and such. Obviously, it's not completely off the table, but another one that takes an awful lot of coordination to bring to fruition, and you need multiple towns and lots of
Yes.
money.
Right. This being a long-term timing, there is really no expectation that notable progress will be made
Yeah.
in any time soon.
Yeah, and I think, also just not to belabor the point, but I think, when the open space and rec plans, they have a 5 to 7 year lifespan. So when it comes time to update, you can kind of look at the progress of these action items from the prior plan and say, okay, well, these weren't addressed for very good reason. It's probably not something that we should realistically consider going forward or what have you. So yeah.
So if there's no other comments from the board, we'll take it that the board is okay with this status report being submitted as is to the person who is collecting these status reports, which just happens to be me.
Yeah, send that to yourself, Harry. You need a motion? So
Sure,
moved.
why not?
Second.
Moved and seconded that this become the board's official OSRP status report. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Delamole,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. I should vote no, just to be ornery, but no, I'll vote aye. Motion carried unanimously. We've completed our obligation for the 2024 Open Space Recreation Plan Status Report. And we now have general business, starting with bills. I believe we have some bills from Graves.
I move that we approve paying the bills.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we approve paying the bills. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Delamole,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We have minutes of the November 25th meeting.
Move we approve them.
Second.
Moved and seconded that the minutes of November 25th be approved as drafted. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Delamole,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. Staff report.
Okay, so I have been, and now that we're more, we have Jack on board. I've been trying to get back into assisting with assisting boards and committees that we kind of had to push to the wayside. One of them being the Affordable Housing Trust, the other being the EDC, and I also would loop in the Open Space and Rec Committee there. Planning does play a role and does handle a lot of administrative and staffing support for those committees in particular. So that's what I've been trying to do. We haven't had as many, as the board knows, as many public hearings at the moment. So Affordable Housing Trust had their goals workshop the other night. Great ideas came out of that. I'll be working with them to get that information in writing and kind of continue. They're going to continue the discussion at their next meeting. They did strongly encourage, the collaboration with planning board on any and all things housing. They had mentioned in particular, and this is my fault, but the town meeting bylaw that was defeated, the mixed use structures, they had said, we would have wrote a letter of support or helped in that effort. So anything that, the planning board is focusing on in terms of housing, which is a lot because obviously most housing is permanent through this board in Grafton. We just, we want to continue to make sure that we're maintaining a good dialogue with them, and that's on me, and I'll make sure to do that, and just improve in that area. So EDC is another group. I am planning on attending their February meeting and just discussing with them how planning can be more of an, as planning staff can be more assistance. As we know, they did lose a staff member, and for a while there it was just Natalia and I, so we couldn't really provide any meaningful assistance. But February they're going to talk about kind of reframing their charge and new goals that they'd like to achieve of the next year. What can we do differently? So looking forward to that. Economic development is definitely a love of mine, so I'm happy to do that. Open Space and Rec Committee meeting is, Dave, I won't speak for you on that, but I will say that we have a meeting. There's been some research requests I'm working on, and hopefully have a bit to present on Wednesday. I have our DLTA, and Bob might want to talk to this as well when it's when we get to reports from planning board reps, but I have the district local technical assistance applications that I'll need to present. I've been requested by CMRPC to have Grafton support 4, but we have kind of 2 more formalized applications. One is for a kind of regional hazard mitigation implementation kind of tactic. With Grafton, with a few other communities, we'll work with CMRPC to implement our hazard mitigation plan, and the second DLTA application, which is totally escaping me. Bob, do you remember?
Which?
The DLTA, the second DLTA application?
No, I don't remember.
I'm completely blanking as well. Apologies for that.
I saw the email, but I can't remember it either.
I'm sorry. It's the flexible development bylaw study that Mike from CMRPC had presented a few meetings ago. Other than that, yeah, just a lot of meetings with people who are interested in developing in Grafton. Specific questions about permitting, reviewing plans ahead of time. More kind of like technical assistance in that regard, and but yeah, and a lot of kind of research requests, like ad hoc requests from like historic commission or like looking into grants. And one thing that I will say is we put in an application for a grant for the local bottleneck program through MassDOT for the North Main Street Waterville Circle intersection, and we got it. So that's exciting. Well, we got through the first round, I suppose, which we have to have a site visit with DPW, Evan, and myself, and a MassDOT consultant will be there and kind of assess the existing conditions. And
So say which intersection again?
North Main Street and Waterville.
Oh.
Yeah, the problematic one, the one that bottlenecks.
The hopeless intersection.
East, yes, yeah. There's.
Charlie Bolak had it. We need a flyover,
Yeah. So, but I mean, that was that was really all DPW. I mean, they had plans and an analysis and a write up of a consultant done already. So I just used that, and we got selected. So that's exciting. And then I put in a application for a grant for the shared streets and spaces, also through MassDOT, for the Perry Hill and Whitney Park work that we're planning on doing, accessible crosswalks and sidewalks. So it's moving along. That's going to take some time. That's a project of mine that I started when I first started in Grafton, and we're making good headway, but it's going to take a while. So
Is there some other staff that's leading the implementation of that?
no. Well, I'm leaning heavily. I mean, my concern that I've been kind of saying is that it's currently not safe with the truck traffic from Washington Mills and people speeding through and all of the things that were examined during the assessment that CMRPC did. But yeah, I don't want to concentrate on any kind of beautification elements of that at any of the parks, really, or that would encourage people to congregate when we don't have crosswalks, we don't have sidewalks, and safe kind of connections. The signage has been installed, the traffic signage has been installed, but we still have some work to do with the infrastructure around the area. Also some wonky property lines around there, and then all sorts of local standards road standards that need to be met. So DPW is working on that. It'll take some time. So
the Physical Development Committee is listening to all the first round proposals tomorrow night.
yes,
Are you?
I think it's Thursday, the 19th.
I
No, I'm sorry, Thursday. I think it's Thursday.
Are you sure?
16th.
No, I think it's tomorrow night, but I have it as tomorrow night.
I have a Zoom invite from them for
Okay.
for Thursday.
Okay.
And yes, I'm going.
You are.
Mhm.
I have it here. Yes. I don't know. Okay. I only have one other meeting tomorrow.
That's all.
Okay. Anything else that anybody needs to ask Fiona? If not, we'll move on to correspondence. The only thing that caught my eye on correspondence was, and it really doesn't affect Grafton because we're already done with it, but it was the SJC finally came out with their ruling on the MBTA communities law, and they said, yes, the legislature intended for all the towns to comply that were covered by it, and yes, the Attorney General can enforce it, but sorry, you guys didn't, the UHLC kind of dropped the ball on passing the guidelines. The end result is UHLC has to come out with the guidelines and following the procedures for issuing regulations. And they said they would
Yeah.
Someone said they were gonna, I think the governor said they expected to come out with emergency regulations last Friday, which didn't happen, but it's sometime soon.
Right. I was gonna
Regulations,
ask.
regulations will come out as formal regulations. I don't expect, and presumably nobody else expects the regulations to change in a way that adversely affects the towns that have already come into compliance.
Yeah. Yeah, my understanding was that, yeah, basically, the only thing that I would add is that I think the deadlines for non-compliant communities are now like obsolete. Like they're not having to, meet what was originally requested, because those were enforced in the guidelines, and the guidelines weren't
Yes.
promulgated.
So those communities that did not meet the December 31st, 2024 deadline are not actually out of compliance at this point.
Yeah. It wasn't a win for Milton, but it wasn't a loss either. So it was interesting.
Milton got to say, yeah, we got something out of this.
Yeah. So,
But
interesting.
now Milton has realizes that, and the other holdout communities realize that, yeah, they're gonna have to come through at some point.
Yep.
But I don't expect that to affect Grafton.
Thank goodness.
I mean, I think we
Got
did
enough
it.
going
we,
on.
we got in there early, and
Yeah, we did.
I think we were in a good spot to begin with.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I saw in correspondence that I thought I'd merited a comment. Bob?
Yeah, I wanted to mention that this blurs into the next, to number 4. The CMRPC Legislative Affairs Breakfast, advancing traffic and pedestrian safety, with several people who are somebody participating. We get emails like this about the different things that CMRPC is doing, and I encourage you to look at them, consider participating, listening, going to where it makes sense. That one is at the Charlton Public Library. But I know that I hear up at CMRPC, I hear so much about the Legislative Affairs Breakfast. Everybody is always excited about that. I guess I have a chance to talk to people who do something about it, which is so unique.
Unusual, yeah. I was gonna say unusual, but
All right. Anything else on correspondence? Any reports from planning board representatives on town committees and CMRPC?
I think I've covered my base.
And mine, as the board's representative on the Open Space and Recreation Committee, we've talked about a couple of things. Just to reiterate, the OSRC is compiling their annual list of status for all the 65 action items that were assigned in that report. We've just reviewed our boards. That makes 7 out of 12 that I've received. The deadline is January 31st. Anything we don't receive, and there are at least a couple of committees that we probably won't receive anything. Committees that haven't met in years. So obviously no action there, but
Who are you meeting on? Besides EDC. I know
EDC, Conservation and Trails Committee, Ag Committee, Police Department.
that. Okay.
I think those are the ones I'm still waiting on.
Okay.
EDC was going to be meeting tonight, but they rescheduled till Thursday night.
They have it on their next agenda. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. And that's would be taken up then.
Ideally, yeah. The Open Space and Rec Committee is meeting on Wednesday night to discuss their action item status, any reports. We've updated the open space inventory, which I've been trying to keep that up to date every year. I'll update it with, there's a few changes, a few additions. The open space inventory, the Article 97 inventory. Waiting for feedback from town council on that, just to make sure I got that.
Yeah, that's in my queue.
Not misrepresenting anything. We're talking about the current initiative that the Open Space Rec Committee has undertaken is to look at town-owned land that is not currently permanently protected, and looking at the possibility of securing permanent protection for parcels that seem to be worthwhile. So that's something Fiona started to work on. The committee will be talking about that Wednesday night. That's basically all the committee is doing right now.
It's a lot.
Any other representatives in town committees? If not, any other items which may lawfully come before the board? I'm pretty sure we don't need to vote to extend the meeting past 10. The chair might be willing to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moving to second that this meeting be adjourned. Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Mr. Hassinger,
Aye.
Mr. Dalamole,
Aye.
Mr. Venkatraman,
Aye.
and Mr. Robbins votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned.